Listen to me carefully. There are moments in life when heaven feels silent, when the doors seem shut, when prayers appear to echo back unanswered, and the soul grows weary from waiting. In those moments, many people think God has stopped moving. Many assume the delay is denial. Many conclude that the struggle means abandonment. But I stand before you to declare something that must shake your spirit awake. Often, when nothing seems to be happening, you are standing one step away from everything changing. One more obedience, just one more, and the floodgates open. I want you to feel this truth, not just hear it. God does not operate on randomness. God is intentional. God is precise. God sees what you cannot see. When you are exhausted, God is not confused. When you are frustrated, God is not late. When you are questioning, God is not shaken. The delay you are experiencing is not proof that God has forgotten you. It is evidence that something weighty is being prepared. And the final key is often a simple, costly, uncomfortable act of obedience that tests whether you truly trust God beyond your emotions, beyond logic, beyond circumstances. There is a place in the journey where faith is no longer emotional. It is no longer exciting. It is no longer fueled by applause or encouragement. It becomes quiet, heavy, and deeply personal. This is where obedience becomes sacred. This is where God watches not what you say, but what you choose. Anyone can obey when the reward is visible. Anyone can follow when the path is clear. But obedience when the outcome is hidden is the kind that moves the heart of God. Many people pray for open heavens, but few are willing to walk through the narrow hallway that leads there. They want the rain without the cloud. They want the harvest without the seed breaking in the ground. They want favor without faithfulness. But God does not waste obedience. God never ignores faith. God never forgets a surrendered heart. Every act of obedience you perform in silence is being recorded. Every tear shed while still choosing righteousness is being counted. Every step taken while trembling is being honored. Understand this: God often allows the pressure to increase right before the breakthrough. The enemy attacks hardest when he senses that the floodgates are about to open. Doubt becomes louder, weariness becomes heavier, distractions multiply, all temptations return. Why? Because one more obedience is dangerous to darkness. One more obedience dismantles barriers you cannot see. One more obedience shifts spiritual atmospheres. One more obedience releases what has been held back for seasons. You may feel like giving up today. You may feel like stopping, retreating, compromising, or settling. But hear this deep in your spirit. If you stop now, you stop inches from abundance. If you quit now, you quit moments before release. If you disobey now, you delay what God is ready to pour out. The enemy does not need to destroy you. He only needs to convince you to stop obeying. God is not asking you for perfection. God is asking you for persistence. God is not demanding strength you do not have. God is asking for surrender with what remains. When your faith feels small, obedience makes it powerful. When your prayers feel weak, obedience gives them weight. When your hope feels thin, obedience thickens it into something unbreakable. There is a spiritual principle that never fails. Obedience precedes overflow. God does not open floodgates to test whether you will obey. God opens floodgates because you already have. Obedience is the proof of trust, And trust is the language God responds to. When you obey, you are saying without words, God, I believe you more than I believe my fear. I believe you more than I believe my past. I believe you more than I believe my circumstances. Some of you have been obedient for a long time. You have prayed when it was hard. You have remained honest when dishonesty would have been easier. You have stayed faithful when no one was watching. You have continued giving, serving, believing, even when it felt like nothing was changing. I want you to know this. Long obedience produces deep wells, and deep wells are what hold floods when they come. God is not slow. God is thorough. God is not withholding. God is preparing capacity. If the blessing came too early, it would crush you. If the door opened before you were ready, you would not recognize it. If the floodgates opened before your foundation was strengthened, you would be swept away by what you prayed for. So God builds you first. God stretches you first. God teaches you obedience in small things before trusting you with great things. There is a reason the final act of obedience often feels the hardest. It usually requires letting go of control. It often demands forgiving when you still hurt, giving when you feel empty, waiting when you want to move, or speaking when you want to remain silent. This obedience is not about logic. It is about alignment. When you align with God's will, heaven aligns with you. I want to speak directly to the tired believer. You who have done everything right and still feel overlooked. You who have obeyed God even when it cost relationships, comfort, and reputation. You who have cried in private but worshiped in public. God sees you. God honors you. God is not finished. The silence you feel is not absence. It is anticipation. The ground is saturated. The clouds are heavy. The floodgates are ready. Do not underestimate the power of finishing what God told you to start. Partial obedience delays full release. God's promises are activated by completion. When you obey halfway, you stand in the doorway of blessing, but never enter the room. When you obey fully, doors swing open that no human effort could unlock. The obedience God is asking of you now may not look dramatic. It may be as simple as staying faithful one more day, praying one more prayer, telling the truth one more time, resisting temptation one more moment, trusting God one more step. But heaven responds to these moments. Angels move at the sound of obedience. Provision shifts when obedience is chosen over comfort. God often tests obedience in the area where you are most tired, not to punish you, but to strengthen you. Because what is coming requires endurance. What is coming requires maturity. What is coming requires a heart anchored in God, not swayed by emotion. The floodgates are not just about blessing. They are about responsibility. Overflow is not just for enjoyment, it is for impact. Some blessings are delayed because God is aligning people, timing, and circumstances beyond your understanding. What feels like waiting is actually orchestration. God is arranging meetings you have not imagined, opportunities you have not requested, and outcomes you could not predict. And the final trigger is obedience. One more obedience aligns everything into place. You may be standing at the edge of your faith, unsure if you can take another step. Take it anyway. You may feel like your obedience has gone unnoticed. It has not. God's attention is not drawn by noise, but by surrender. When you obey quietly, you are shouting in the Spirit. I declare this truth with conviction. The season of barely enough is breaking. The season of closed doors is ending. The season of silent skies is shifting. But the key is still in your hand. One more obedience. Do not hand it away. Do not drop it. Do not trade it for relief that is temporary. When the floodgates open, they do not trickle, they pour. When God releases what he has stored, it comes with momentum. Restoration does not arrive slowly. Favor does not come cautiously. Provision does not hesitate. God's abundance overwhelms in ways that erase the memory of lack. But before the flood, there is faith. Before the overflow, there is obedience. Before the breakthrough, there is surrender. God is watching how you respond now, not because he doubts you, but because he is about to trust you. Stand firm. Stay obedient. Choose God again today. Not because you feel strong, but because he is faithful. Not because the path is clear, but because his word is sure. Not because the reward is visible, but because obedience itself is victory. Your obedience today is opening doors you may never see, but will surely benefit from. Your obedience is changing generations. Your obedience is shifting your future. And as you choose God one more time, as you obey one more instruction, as you trust one more promise, the atmosphere changes, the heavens respond, the floodgates begin to tremble, and what has been held back prepares to move, because obedience has reached its fullness, and alignment has been completed, and God's timing has arrived, and the release that was delayed is now pressing forward, waiting for that final act of surrender, that final yes, that final step that seals what has already been decided in the unseen realm, where God's power is already moving, already flowing, already opening what cannot be shut, already pouring what cannot be contained. There is a sacred tension that exists right before divine release. It is the tension between what you see and what God has already decided. Your eyes report limitation, but God has decreed abundance. Your emotions report exhaustion, but God has prepared strength. Your circumstances whisper delay, but God has already set the moment. This tension is not meant to break you. It is meant to refine you. It is the pressure that presses faith into obedience and obedience into power. Many people misunderstand the silence of God. They interpret it as distance, but in truth it is depth. God is not speaking loudly because he is working deeply. Roots grow in silence. Foundations are laid in quiet places. When God is shaping you for overflow, he reduces noise so you can hear instruction. Because when the floodgates open, obedience must already be embedded in your nature, not something you negotiate when things become difficult. There is an obedience that flows from desperation, and there is an obedience that flows from trust. Desperation obeys to escape pain. Trust obeys because it knows God is good even without evidence. God is drawing you out of survival obedience and into covenant obedience. A place where you do not obey just to get something, but because you belong to God completely. This level of obedience attracts a different kind of release, one that transforms not just situations, but identity. Some of you are standing at a crossroads where obedience requires choosing God over familiarity. Familiar pain feels safer than unfamiliar promise. Familiar struggle feels predictable. But God never builds destiny on familiarity. He builds it on faith. The next obedience may require leaving a mindset, a habit, a relationship, or an old version of yourself. This is not loss. This is alignment, and alignment unlocks access. God does not flood what is divided. He pours into what is unified. When your heart, actions, and beliefs align with God's will, there is nothing blocking the flow. Many delays are not about timing. They are about alignment. God is not asking you to do more. He is asking you to come into agreement. Agreement with His ways. Agreement with His truth. Agreement with His authority. There are moments when obedience feels like weakness to the world. Choosing humility when pride is applauded. C. Choosing integrity when compromise is rewarded. Choosing patience when shortcuts are available. But what looks like weakness in the natural realm is strength in the spiritual realm. God strengthens what you surrender. God defends what you entrust. God promotes what you place in His hands. You must understand this deeply. God is not responding to your urgency. He is responding to your obedience. Urgency cries loudly, but obedience moves heaven. Many prayers remain unanswered because they are filled with emotion, but empty of surrender. When you align your will with God's will, prayer becomes agreement, and agreement carries authority. There is a weight to obedience that changes atmospheres. Rooms shift when obedient people walk in. Families change when one person chooses righteousness. Futures alter when one heart refuses to compromise. You may feel insignificant, but obedience multiplies impact beyond what you can measure. God uses small obediences to create large outcomes. Some of you have asked God why the struggle has lasted so long. The answer is not punishment, it is preparation. God prepares vessels before filling them. God enlarges capacity before releasing abundance. The stretching you feel is not to exhaust you, but to expand you. What is coming requires a broader faith, a deeper trust, and a firmer obedience than you have ever known. There is also a warning hidden within this truth. When floodgates open, they expose foundations. What is shallow is washed away. What is unstable collapses. God is merciful to delay release until your foundation is secure. Obedience builds stability. Obedience anchors you so that when blessing arrives, it does not destroy you. God is not impressed by loud declarations without quiet obedience. Words are easy. Surrender is costly. And God always responds to what costs you something. Obedience that costs comfort, reputation, convenience or control is the obedience that releases heaven, because it proves that God is not just a preference, but a priority. There are instructions you received long ago that you have postponed, not rejected, just delayed. And delay has disguised itself as wisdom, but obedience delayed is obedience denied. God is calling you back to unfinished instructions, back to neglected commitments, back to surrendered ground, not to shame you, but to restore flow. You are closer than you think. The resistance you feel is not a sign to retreat. It is a sign to press in. Breakthrough is rarely gentle. It is often born through perseverance. The final obedience feels heavy because it carries the weight of transition. You are crossing from one season into another. God does not reveal everything at once because obedience requires trust. If you knew the full picture, obedience would be calculation, not faith. God reveals steps, not maps. And each step of obedience illuminates the next. Light follows obedience, not intention. There is a divine exchange happening when you obey. You give God your yes, and God gives you His power. You give God your weakness, and God gives you His strength. You give God your uncertainty, and God gives you His assurance. This exchange is the foundation of overflow. You must guard your heart in this season. The closer you get to release, the more subtle distractions become. Not obvious sin, but subtle compromise. Not open rebellion, but quiet disobedience. The enemy knows that if he can delay your obedience, he can delay the flood. But today, strength is rising within you. Not emotional strength, but spiritual resolve. A resolve that says, I will obey God even when it costs me. A resolve that says, I will trust God even when I do not understand. This resolve is dangerous to limitation. This resolve attracts heaven. God is not looking for perfect people. God is looking for yielded hearts. Hearts that say yes without conditions. Hearts that remain faithful without guarantees. Hearts that obey without applause. These hearts become conduits for divine release. What God is about to do will make sense of what you endured. Pain will not be wasted. Tears will not be forgotten. Waiting will not be in vain. The floodgates do not open to impress you. They open to fulfill purpose. And purpose always requires obedience. Stay there. Stay obedient. Stay surrendered. Stay aligned. Even now, unseen doors are unlocking. Unseen resistance is breaking. Unseen provision is moving. Because when obedience reaches its measure, heaven responds not slowly, not cautiously, but fully. And the momentum of God's release begins to build layer upon layer, moment upon moment, until what was once restrained can no longer be contained. And what was once delayed now surges forward with unstoppable force, responding to a heart that chose God one more time and chose obedience again, and refused to turn back even when the weight was heavy and the road was narrow, because faith had matured into trust, and trust had deepened into surrender, and surrender had completed its work. There is a moment when obedience stops feeling like effort and starts becoming identity. You no longer ask whether you should obey, you simply do, because obedience has reshaped how you see God, how you see yourself, and how you see the world. This is the moment when fear loses its authority. Fear survives on uncertainty, but obedience feeds certainty. When you obey consistently, your spirit learns that God is faithful even when outcomes are unseen, and that knowledge becomes unshakable. Many people think faith is about believing hard enough, but faith is proven by moving. And faith without obedience is only admiration from a distance. Obedience is faith in action. It is belief with legs. It is trust made visible. And God responds not to intentions, but to alignment. When your steps match your prayers Heaven listens differently. There are hidden obediences that no one applauds, decisions made in private, battles fought alone, choices that feel unseen and uncelebrated. These are the obediences God treasures most, because they are not performed for recognition. They are offered in purity, and pure obedience releases pure power. What is done in secret creates strength in public. God often allows you to reach the end of yourself so that obedience no longer competes with pride. When you are strong, obedience feels optional. When you are weak, obedience becomes essential. This is not cruelty, it is mercy. God is removing anything that would take credit for what He is about to do. When the floodgates open, there will be no confusion about the source. Glory will not be shared. The testimony will be clear. Some of you have been asking God for clarity, but God has been asking you for courage. Clarity often comes after obedience, not before it. The first step is rarely explained. It is revealed through trust. When you obey without full understanding, you declare that God's wisdom is greater than your need for certainty. That declaration carries authority. There is also a refinement that happens when obedience is prolonged. Your motives are purified. Your dependence deepens. Your sensitivity sharpens. You learn to recognize God's direction not just in dramatic moments, but in subtle nudges. This sensitivity protects you when abundance comes. Overflow without discernment can become distraction. God trains you now so you can steward what comes later. Understand that obedience does not always remove hardship, but it always gives hardship meaning. G, pain with purpose is not the same as pain without direction. Obedience transforms suffering into preparation. What once felt like resistance becomes resistance training. You are being strengthened for weight you have not yet lifted. God also uses obedience to heal what is broken inside you. Each time you obey instead of retreat, courage grows. Each time you obey instead of compromise, integrity strengthens. Each time you obey instead of despair, hope deepens. You are not just waiting for a breakthrough. You are becoming someone who can carry it. There is a dangerous lie that whispers, "You have obeyed enough." Enough obedience, enough faith, enough waiting. But obedience is not measured by duration. It is measured by completion. God is not counting how long you have obeyed. God is watching whether you will finish. Finishing carries power. Completion releases authority. The final obedience often feels insignificant compared to the promise. It may not look heroic. It may not feel spiritual. It may simply be choosing trust when disappointment would be justified. But heaven measures differently than earth. What seems small to you may be massive in the unseen realm. God is not testing you to see if you will fail. God is positioning you to succeed. Tests reveal readiness. Obedience proves maturity. And maturity attracts responsibility. What is coming will require wisdom, humility, and restraint. God is cultivating these qualities in you now through obedience that feels repetitive, unglamorous, and slow. You are not being delayed. You are being deepened. Shallow roots cannot support tall growth. God is ensuring that when you rise, you remain standing. Obedience anchors you. It ties you to God's character, not just God's gifts. Gifts without character create collapse. Character built through obedience creates longevity. There is also an invitation hidden in obedience. God is inviting you into partnership. Obedience says, I trust you enough to follow. And God responds, I trust you enough to involve you. The floodgates are not just blessings poured on you. They are resources released through you. God blesses obedient people so they can become channels, not containers. Your obedience is teaching others even when they do not know it. People are watching how you endure, how you choose, how you remain faithful. Your quiet consistency is preaching louder than words. God uses obedient lives to restore faith in others who have grown cynical. There will be moments when obedience feels lonely, when those around you choose easier paths, when compromise looks appealing, when your way feels narrow. But remember this, wide paths lead to crowds, narrow paths lead to destiny. God meets obedient hearts in places few are willing to go. You must also release the need for immediate validation. Obedience that depends on feedback will collapse under pressure. True obedience is sustained by conviction, not confirmation. God's approval is sufficient. God's presence is enough. Even now, something is shifting. Not because circumstances have changed, but because you are changing. Your obedience is strengthening spiritual muscles. Your trust is becoming steady. Your resolve is becoming firm. These internal shifts precede external breakthroughs. The floodgates do not open because you demand them. They open because obedience has prepared the ground. Prepared ground receives rain differently. It absorbs, it multiplies, it produces. God is making you fertile through faithfulness. Remain attentive. The instruction that unlocks everything may not come with drama. It may come quietly, in a thought, in a conviction, in a moment of choice. Do not dismiss small promptings. Great releases often hinge on subtle obedience. You are not alone in this journey. God is present in every step, strengthening your will, steadying your heart, guiding your choices. The same God who called you to obey is the God who empowers you to continue. You are sustained by grace, not grit. As obedience continues to shape you, resistance loses ground. What once felt heavy begins to feel natural. What once required effort becomes instinct. This is transformation. This is growth. This is preparation reaching completion. As faith matures, trust deepens, surrender stabilizes, and obedience becomes the language your life speaks fluently, aligning you fully with God's will as unseen forces continue to move, unseen doors continue to unlock, unseen provisions continue to gather, responding to a heart that has chosen alignment over ease, faith over feeling, surrender over control, and obedience over understanding. Allowing the momentum of what God has already set in motion to continue building without interruption, without retreat, without compromise, as the unseen prepares to become seen, and what has been promised draws closer through every obedient step taken forward. So I ask you now, in this sacred moment, to pause and listen not with your ears, but with your soul. Look honestly at where you stand. Look at the places where obedience has been delayed, negotiated, or softened. Not with shame, not with fear, but with courage. Because God is not exposing you to condemn you. God is inviting you to rise. The call before you is not heavy because it is cruel. It is heavy because it is holy. God is calling you higher, deeper, closer. This is the moment to choose alignment over convenience, to choose surrender over control, to choose faithfulness over familiarity. God is not asking for grand gestures that impress others. God is asking for a yielded heart that obeys even when it trembles. The smallest act of obedience done with a pure heart carries more power than the loudest declaration spoken without surrender. Examine your life carefully. Where has God spoken clearly, yet action has been postponed? Where has comfort replaced conviction? Where has fear silenced obedience? These are not accusations. They are invitations. Invitations to return. Invitations to realign. Invitations to trust again. God does not revoke purpose because of delay. God restores momentum when obedience resumes. Let today be the day you stop standing at the edge of decision. Let today be the day obedience moves from intention to action. Not tomorrow, not when it feels easier, not when conditions improve. Now, because obedience is not about perfect timing, it is about present surrender. God meets you in the now. Walk forward with humility, but also with confidence. You are not stepping alone. God walks with those who trust Him. God strengthens those who lean on Him. God honors those who choose Him above all else. Every obedient step you take reshapes your future. Every surrendered choice draws you closer to the heart of God. Do not underestimate the power of a life fully yielded. One obedient heart can change a family. One obedient life can shift generations. One obedient decision can open paths that were never visible before. God works through availability, not ability. Through surrender, not strength. Carry this truth with you. Obedience is not loss, it is alignment. It is not restriction, it is protection. It is not weakness, it is power under authority. When you obey God, you are stepping into the flow of divine purpose that cannot be stopped by opposition, delayed by doubt, or diminished by fear. Let your life speak a quiet, unshakable yes to God. Let your actions preach louder than your words. Let your faith be proven not by what you claim, but by how you choose. Stay faithful when no one applauds. Stay obedient when no one understands. Stay surrendered when the path feels narrow. And as you walk this path, anchored in trust, strengthened by surrender, guided by obedience, may your heart remain soft, your spirit remain attentive, and your life remain aligned with God, so that every step you take becomes an act of worship, every choice becomes a testimony, and every breath becomes a declaration that God alone is worthy of your trust, your obedience, your devotion, and your life.